Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Art History Festival and this evening's talk. So my name is Christina Bradstreet. I'm the head of programs, and it's a pleasure to introduce you to welcome you to this evening's talk. So this evening is one of our events of the Art History Festival, a week of events celebrating art history local to global. The festival is organised by the Association of Art History and is taking place across the UK and beyond in partnership with museums and galleries and other cultural institutions, with events happening both online and in person. So I'm really delighted that we have with us this evening Celia Joycey, Director of Dovecot Studios, and Naomi Robertson, who is a master weaver and head of the Dovecot Tapestry Studio. So they're going to be talking about the work of Dovecot Studios and the making of their major tapestry with Chrysophili, the Cage Birds song, which was commissioned by the Clothworkers Company. And they now have an exhibition on which has brought the tapestry back to Scotland and back to Dovecot Studios where it was made. So welcome, Celia, and welcome, Naomi. Brilliant.
Hello.
Hello.
So we just thought we'd introduce ourselves, or do you want to?
Go for it. So I'll hand over to you.
Okay, so I'm Celia,
And I'm Naomi.
and this is a special birthday for Naomi because this is your you're just starting your 35th year at Dovecot, which is quite amazing. So what we're going to do is talk you through a little bit of context for Dovecot Studios, and then it's a privilege to have Naomi here tonight because Naomi Robertson is the head of the studios, so she looks after the programme of tapestries that are being made. But also Naomi led the art direction of the creation of the Chrysophili tapestry, which ran between 2014 and 2017. But which is currently on show in our exhibition spaces on the ground floor. So I'm just going to share the screen. And hopefully you can see that, Christina. I won't look.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Great. So this is the exhibition which closes on the 5th of October. And we've had people in tears with, I guess it's kind of overwhelming. And for some people, the tapestry has only been shown on public display in the National Gallery in London. So for visitors who are closer to Scotland, it's been their first time to see it. And it's got to work out how this moves now. There we go. Sorry. Perfect. So here we are in the studios, which are actually just in front of where we're sitting now. And just to give you some context, we're going to be talking about textiles and tapestry, but our role at Dovecot Studios is to increase the visibility, the knowledge, the understanding, the appreciation of both. So this is also where we are. It's been really sunny, hasn't it? In
It's been lovely today.
I didn't get out, but
yeah.
And Dovecot is based just over here. This is a view of Edinburgh from Carlton Hill, and it looks down into what is called the new town of Edinburgh. And then you cross over the bridges, over the bridge
North Bridge.
To the old town, which runs, in some ways, I'm going to show you a map, but from Edinburgh Castle right the way down to Holyrood Palace over here, and Dovecot is based just near the centre of the university, which has that lovely domed building there. Just to put you in context, I'm not sure how many people or where you are at the moment, but that view was from Carlton Hill. The castle that we looked across to is here, and that runs down on what they call the Royal Mile, all the way down to Holyrood House. And so Dovecot is right in the centre of Edinburgh's old town. This is where we work.
Yeah, this is home.
This wasn't taken in lockdown. We worked all the way through lockdown, and you had the privilege of parking right outside, didn't you? Where they took all the parking restrictions off in Edinburgh. But this is a converted bathhouse. So you come into Dovecot through the door here, and our gallery spaces are on the ground floor and at the back of the building. And the studios are located right in the heart of the building. This is how it looked back in the 1980s before, and the 1990s before Dovecot, the building, was rescued. So you can see that some things have been reconstructed. And this was our weaving floor. Do you remember it like this?
I do remember it like that, yeah. It's a big transformation to what it's like today.
And so you can see the team at work. It's like you there.
That's me. Yeah.
You and Ben. And this just jumping down is just to set a little bit of the history of Dovecot. So this is one of our close neighbours, but Dovecot is a 20th century tapestry studio, but you can see lots of older and more historic tapestries within the city of Edinburgh. So Holyrood House is the palace. We often we've got international visitors, we take them down to see some of the context for tapestry in Scotland. And it's obviously where the king will meet the head of state, now Keir Starmer, once a year, and is in residence generally for a couple of weeks in the summer. And as you go through the palace, you can see many tapestries. This is an example of tapestry being some of the oldest and finest and most expensive art that you could create, acquire, commission back in the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries. So this panel is, for example, from a series of Brussels tapestries, the planets. You've got Mars embracing Venus. And it's just to give you a little bit of the context of how Dovecot tapestry is different and how we sit in a rather different tradition. So this is Mount Stuart, and Mount Stuart is where the Bute family had their one of their key homes. It was rebuilt after a fire in the late 19th century, but it was the Marquess of Bute who, in his infinite wisdom, decided in 1912 to create a tapestry studio, ostensibly to create tapestries for the Bute family homes. And he enticed two weavers who had been trained by William Morris to come up to Edinburgh. And so that was really the beginning of the studios. And Naomi, you are in a lineage, aren't you, of sort of the passing down of intangible craft skills from those original weavers.
Yeah, it's not that many steps back.
So this is just an example of a cartoon that William Morris created for Morris & Co. And you can see that it's got a very different language to the earlier tapestries. But Morris believed he was what they call a pre-Raphaelite. So he wanted to go back pre-Raphael to a moment in history when the craftsmen, the craftspeople, the artisans were the artists of the day, sort of almost pre the Renaissance. And this would be an example of what Morris believed was the ideal form of tapestry. We have an exhibition actually that we created opening about William Morris's design, specifically wallpaper, that opens in York. That opens next week on Friday, which is interesting just to see how Morris had a belief that there was a moral need for the way in which tapestries were designed and his other work to be imaginative, to reflect the head, the heart, and the hand. And this would be another set of tapestries that also were about placing you in this sort of immersive art form, so that tapestry at its best is on this grand scale where you're stepping into the middle of la chasse, the hunt. You're enveloped in a world that oh, there's a load of black in. Sorry, we've got an event going on, so apologise if any sound. Yeah, no, I've done the same. Right. So these are the weavers back in the early 20th century creating a cartoon. And this we'll talk to you a little bit in a moment. Naomi will explain to you how a cartoon is created today, because we do have the advantage of technology, but you can see that they're scaling up the original design to create the outline, which will be inked onto the tapestry. And this is the weaving team in 1947. You might see we're a slightly more diverse bunch now. Women didn't get admitted to the Dovecot studios to make tapestry, but there were 3 women that wove on the Ophelia tapestries. Yeah. And we continue to be a studio that has both men and women weavers. But this is Archie Brennan, who anyone who knows Dovecot well might be familiar with his name and his work, because he created many of the tapestries in the 1960s and 70s in partnership with artists such as Edoardo Paolozzi. We made an exhibition on Archie Brennan back in 2022. So this is the team, Naomi, Louise, Emma Jo, and what we should have done is add in our current apprentice, Sophie McCaffrey, who is supported by the Clothworkers Foundation, who were, of course, the commissioner of the Chris Ofili, the Caged Bird Song Street. So we're going to step inside. We're going to take you in a moment into the exhibition, but just to sort of outline the tapestry process before Naomi speaks. The Chris Ofili tapestry, this is an image of it installed at the National Gallery in London back in 2017. It was an exhibition that opened in April 2017, closed in September 2017, and was a really important moment for Dovecot Studios to have one of our creations exhibited right in the heart, in the Sunley Rooms of the National Gallery, which is right at the heart of the art world in London. And just looking at how that was presented, you can see that you are heading right the way through into the Sunley Rooms. And this image shows the design for the tapestry. We'll look at that in our exhibition Matterport in a moment, but also the tapestry itself. And Chris worked with scenographers from the English National Opera around close by to the National Gallery to paint the walls in the installation. So this is where you start, isn't it?
This is. So this is a detail of part of Chrissy's watercolour and charcoal design. And as you saw in that picture, we like to work from a much smaller design and scale it up. And by doing this, it gives the weavers much more scope to work into the mark making, just gives us a bit of space. So you can see that there's lots of different things going on. There's the watercolour, charcoal, the lines, which are all challenges to us. So Chris, one of his first, after visiting the studio, one of his first comments was that he wanted to challenge the weavers, and he felt he wanted to challenge the weavers to weave water. So that wasn't just the medium of watercolour, but also water as an image. So you'll see that further down the line.
And when you will show the design on a smaller scale, but it's quite interesting to see this detail only because that's the artist's aesthetic, that's their handwriting that you've got to interpret.
Yeah, and so every tapestry is different. So one of the first things that we need to do is work out what that mark making is, that language. I describe it as the artist's handwriting, and for each person that's different. So we really need to find the approach collectively. So the weavers all have to weave in the same style. So we have to, one of the first things we're doing is working out that language and how we're going to approach it so that we're all weaving collegiately as one tapestry, not 4 different tapestries happening on the same loom.
And the opportunity to show this detail for you who are watching at home is you start to get drawn into how pigment gets picked up, how water bleeds into different parts of the paper, how what we would refer to as the artist's incidental marks, and we've got a few examples to show you, where the artist's experience means that they might not be conscious or thinking of how they're applying paint to the paper because it's born of years of practice. But when the weavers get to look at it, no one will look at an artist's work as closely as the weaving team, which hopefully is a privilege.
Yeah, I mean, we really do sort of scrutinise it and look into every mark, and especially with the medium as fluid as watercolour, there is a certain amount of things that are happening that the painter doesn't have control over. But something that happens really fluidly in their work, we have to actually make that conscious decision to weave it. So it's quite a strange sort of contrast in that one thing happens, but we have to make quite a conscious decision about it.
So I think what is so stunning about this, both Chris's design, but the interpretation, is the jewel-like colour.
Yeah.
And I would say that's something Dovecot is really distinctive.
So there's a wonderful quality about tapestry in a painting or a drawing, or the light reflects off the surface, but with the textile it absorbs the light, and then it almost makes colour resonate. It makes it jewel-like, and it's one of the pleasures of working in tapestry is that intensity of colour and the way that you really feel like there's light coming from the tapestry.
And we'll show you in detail in a moment in the exhibition, but if you get the chance to visit, I think that was what has so beguiled or impressed some of the visitors, or in fact made them quite emotional, because when you look at Chris's design, you start to see these stains, yeah, and how one pigment is bleeding into the next, and the sparking of the charcoal, which you can't necessarily control as easily.
So there's places where the charcoal line has kind of bled into the watercolour and left almost, it sort of pulled into the watercolour and left this kind of flecky, sparky, as we described it with Chris, sort of marks, which are quite interesting.
And it's sort of, yeah, where it's tracing the texture of the paper as well. So it's all about this gorgeous.
And that drawing of a line where it isn't just registering as one weight as it disappears and then it comes back just with the weight of the charcoal on the paper.
So perhaps go into this section of the tapestry when we go online. So we looked earlier at the image of a cartoon being created back in the earlier 20th century. This is the central panel of the tapestry. So it's actually woven in 3 parts, the tapestry, as you will have noted earlier in the image. and this is the cartoon. So I'm going to ask Naomi just to explain a little bit about how this cartoon is created.
So the cartoon is our guide, our map, and first of all, we create it by laying an acetate over either the original artwork or a good copy of the original artwork. And the weaver is making this line drawing that is defining colour changes, tonal changes, the things that we need to know. And the weavers make this, think if the artist did it, it would be a very different drawing. But this is what the information that we need to create the tapestry. So once that line drawing is made on the acetate, it gets enlarged by photocopy up to the size of the tapestry. That is then held behind the warps, and we'll see that, and is drawn onto the warps, and that is our guide.
And I love what the Dovecot team do with the cartoons, because I think that is where Dovecot's sort of intellectual kind of property, copyright sort of brings a new element, because you wouldn't necessarily fully recognize Chris's work here, but this is your stepping stone, isn't it, to a new artwork and a new interpretation. Okay, let's move into the next one. Oh, perfect.
So this shows the cartoon held behind the warps, and it's pushed quite hard against the warps while the weavers draw those lines onto the warps. So just to explain to you, the warps are the uprights. They're the sort of skeleton of the tapestry. There's a cotton warp which is stretched up and down, as Celia is showing, and then the weft is the part that we weave in. So there you can see some of the drawing on the warps, and that is our guide that we then will work into and put more information, more detail into. But it means that we're getting everything in the right proportion, it's happening at the right place, you know, nothing's getting squashed or moved.
And here you haven't marked the whole cartoon onto the warps, have you?
No, so we ink on in sections, usually about 2 foot sections at a time. And this is because the tapestry gets rolled down around the bottom roller of the loom as we weave. And that means that we're always working at a good height. We're not getting sore backs, we're not getting tired arms. We learn to sit straight very quickly. But what it means is that we, as weavers, the artist, everyone else, is only ever seeing a section of the tapestry at a time. It's just a strip, probably at most 2 foot. So
your brain,
it's quite an abstract process.
And I guess that was where, showing you that detail, you're so immersed, aren't you, in what might be a very small part of an artwork, but you're, in an ideal world, you get to increase that mark at really quite an amazing scale.
And we're breaking it down and really peering into the design and the tapestry. But at the same time, we have to keep the whole picture in our heads, so that we need to know that what we've put in at the start is going to work with the end of the tapestry, because you can't go back and redo a bit. Once it's in and it's rolled down, that's it. So you really have to be sure that your palette the whole way is going to work, and that it's all going to look like one tapestry.
And here on some of the bobbins, so if we look here, you're trying, here you've got the mark of the charcoal that we saw, Chris's line, but I can see on these bobbins how many different colours are you adding to try and interpret
So there could be 6 or 8 threads of yarn on that. We very rarely weave with flat colour, so we're mixing different yarns, coloured yarns together to arrive at that colour. And sometimes it can be like smooth mixture, sometimes it can have that, we describe it as worried, where it's got maybe a contrast in it, and that's how we can get that sort of scrapey line effect or something bleeding into something else. So just by, say, putting a blue into the purple, you can almost feel like the paint shining through, or one thing's coming across the other.
And it's not like paint where you just blend 2 colours, like the 2 primary colours, the red and the blue, to make the purple. You've got to work with secondary, tertiary.
Yeah. And sometimes we'll add something really unexpected in, and it just makes a colour pop.
So for years I worked in a museum called the Fashion and Textile Museum, and Zandra Rhodes, the founder, talked about textile artists' work as being the sort of the Cinderellas. Certainly in fashion, the textile print designer is the Cinderella of the world. But this is where there is equality, isn't there, between the person who's created the design or has created the original artwork from which the tapestry is created. So talk me through what these initials are.
So those initials, which look upside down, but they will fall over and down the back of the tapestry. So they start with the artist's initials, so in this case, Chrysophylle. Then we've got the Dovecot mark, which is our studio mark, which is woven into every tapestry and means that the tapestry can be identified back to us. And then the weaver's initials. So we've got Jonathan Cleaver, Emma Jo Webster, and Louise Trotter. And that was the second of the 3 panels. So we've got that mark. So those white marks that Celia's highlighting just now, that is actually the end of the tapestry, the end of the image. We always weave an extra 2 inches and continue the design up, because the warps are under so much tension that when you take that tension off, the tapestry can shrink a little bit. So that just gives us that little bit of leeway to make sure that the tapestry is square and that it turns out the right size. So that gets folded back almost like a hem, top and bottom. Means that the ends of the warps are hidden, they get trimmed down, and it's got a nice neat edge on all 4 sides.
And then you've already seen the picture of Chris cutting the tapestry. So each tapestry was woven over a period of, it was a total period of 3 years. And you've mentioned that you only ever see that strip as you weave, and then the tapestry gets wound down. This is what we call the cutting off. And Chris came all the way, didn't he, from Trinidad for this moment. Tell us why this is such a exciting moment.
We haven't seen the whole of the tapestry, and on this day we are seeing it for the first time, but not in private. So we're sharing it with the artist, with the commissioner, in this instance, the film crew, invited guests. So we invite a person, often the artist, to cut the tapestry from the loom. The weavers won't do it. We see it as bad luck to cut our own tapestries off. So the warps are actually cut through the whole length, top and bottom, and then the tapestry is revealed for everyone at the same time. So we don't get that chance for a sneak peek to just see how it went. It happens quite publicly. So it's exciting, but it's also quite nerve-wracking.
And in this case, they're all very big tapestries, so there's quite a lot to unroll.
Yeah.
So in a moment, we're going to jump into the exhibition that's currently in Dovecot. But just to show you, this was the installation of the tapestries. This is Chris with one of his children, seeing it being hung. You can see it was hung at a height. It's actually slightly lower at Dovecot, so you can get that little bit closer. But he had this whole scenography around the tapestry to put it into a context. And there it is at the National Gallery. And I think there are lots of interpretations of what Chris was doing. He was given an absolutely open brief. I think with some artists, they're quite open to a tight brief. It can be quite exciting. But in this instance, when it was Dovecot who suggested that Chris could be an exciting artist for both Dovecot and the Clothworkers to collaborate. The Clothworkers, which is one of the really important and old London guilds, had wanted to support Dovecot, which was how the idea for a tapestry for their hall came about. And the reason it's on display at Dovecot at the moment is that their hall is being refurbished. And so that's how we're here. But you've got this almost, you could think of it as a sort of paradise or a Garden of Eden. You have these two figures, the man with the caged bird and the feminine figure at the side. And then this third person playing a lute. And if you come to the exhibition, it's harder to see here, but it's an image of Mario Balotelli with his head on the side pouring a cocktail. Mario Balotelli is a famous footballer who was based in Manchester and was quite a significant figure for Chris. He was someone who didn't necessarily kowtow to how the football manager wanted him to behave. And Chris's title for the tapestry, the Caged Bird Song, not only reflects the men in Trinidad who have a tradition of keeping birds, but also the title of Maya Angelou's autobiography, or sort of referencing her life, where she similarly doesn't want to fit into the limits of the world that she thinks have been imposed upon her. So you have what is really a beautiful, sensational watercolor, but there are lots of ways to interpret, and Chris is quite happy for that to happen. So before we go into a few other tapestries, because I know we're sort of going to keep to time, I'm just going to give you a whistle-stop tour. It's always a bit nerve-wracking moving screens. So I'm just going to click onto the exhibition. So we're using a technology here called Matterport. And this, if I come out, you can see this is the exhibition that you can visit at the moment. And the tapestry is in our final large North Gallery. But if we go, oops, sorry, going in. We're going to go and walk around this. So you come into the exhibition and we have a whole section that looks at the around the history of the cloth workers and how they have supported Dovecot. But I'm just going to step you in to see the design. To go gently. So this is the watercolor, and you can see it's really quite small.
Yeah.
What did you think when how did you first see it? On an email or?
No, in person. Yeah, I don't know what I was expecting, but yeah, it was really quite beautiful, but it is very small. So the largest one is, I think, A3, and the two smaller ones are about A4. So they're not that big at all.
And it is, I think, exciting. So what we've done within the exhibition at Dovecot, which of course you're encouraged to come up and see the weaving studios as well, is to talk through that process. So in this cabinet, so it makes we have the materials for the acetate, and how
so that is the original tracing. And to the left there, you can see our inking on tools. So they are calligraphy pens and Indian ink. So when we draw those lines onto the warps, we're dipping and drawing on, and then each little dot that goes on has to be inked the whole way around the warps, because the warps move as we weave.
So we've got a section showing the cartoon, and then we also have, on days when you can't pop into the weaving studio, we've got some live weaving that happens to help explain. But then on this wall, we have all of your amazing colour samples, don't we? Which is really, so if we, I'm going to try and focus this a little bit more. So why do you create these samples before you start a tapestry?
So the samples, the colour strips that you can see, one here, is really us starting to work out the palette of colours, and just get a feel for what material we're going to weave them in. Is it going to be wools? Is it going to be linens, cottons? And actually in this tapestry we used all of those. Sometimes we would put a shiny thread in just to make the water sparkle a bit. So that's us just initially getting a feel for those colours. And as we weave, they change, they develop, because even just weaving that small strip, when you weave it on a bigger scale, it changes. Sometimes the colours need to be pumped up a bit or taken down. So, and then below that, you can actually see us starting to explore some of the mark making and how we would achieve those sort of spills of water as they start to bleed out, or how the lines work. And sometimes they're solid, sometimes they get quite thin and scraped.
And we haven't got the backs here, have we? It's going to come back. We've got a series of films. So Naomi mentioned the film, filming of the tapestry, the film crew that were in the studios when the cutting off happened. And there were two films that we made. One, the BBC made a documentary about, rooted in the tapestry, but also Chris Ofili and his practice as a Black British artist, who was born in Manchester, who later went to Chelsea College of Art and to the Royal College. And I think it's interesting, having just created a tapestry with Kay Donachie, who's an artist some of you might know from her recent exhibition at Pallant House. But Kay was at the Royal College in the late 80s, early 90s, similar time to Chris. And the Royal College wasn't the coolest place to be in London at that time. A lot of the energy was in Goldsmiths. There's an exhibition coming up about Michael Craig Martin, who led the course, the fine art course at Goldsmiths. So it's interesting for these artists who work with really quite aesthetic and painterly techniques, because they really lend themselves to being interpreted in tapestry.
Yeah.
We've worked with some of those conceptual artists from the period. So you get to sort of watch a film, but now what we're going to do is step down into what we call our South Gallery to see the tapestry itself. And I've got one of our beautiful Jim Partridge bench that you get to sit on. And you can see how the scale differs. It is a bit tricky with this Matterport, but but it's that ability to, and a lot of people who've walked into the room initially can't believe it's been woven, but it's the ability of tapestry and textile to really create an atmosphere, speaking back to what Morris aspired to. And he thought tapestry was the finest of the fine arts, which is why he wanted to revive it in the 19th century. But also that aesthetic that he aspired to informed how some of the great tapestry collectors, specifically William Burrell in Glasgow, but he was trying to outbid the American collectors at the turn of the century, the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, because they wanted to get back to that more, I think, artistic interpretation of expression within the medium. So I'm going to just move us out back into the right window. And then this is just before we answer any questions, Naomi be able to answer all the questions that you might have. It's just to talk you through some of the projects that we've undertaken more recently. So if you are coming to Edinburgh, we would really recommend going to visit the tapestry that we created for Parabola, which is a really inspired property developer, that has taken on a huge site within the city of Edinburgh, but to the west of the city, called Edinburgh Park. And this was what really saved Dovecot. We don't get any public funding as a studios and an exhibition contemporary art centre. So we need commissions of tapestry to fund how we work, but we also use our building to generate income through ticket sales, great cafe. But this commission during lockdown, we couldn't do any of that activity, but the tapestry weaving was able to keep going. I think we officially decided we were a manufacturer. Yeah. We're really artists, so all the weavers are artists. So this is a painting in the National Gallery by Rubens called Minerva Protects Pax from Mars. This is Mars, the god of war, Minerva, who is stepping in, and Pax, who is feeding and sustaining the future through these children. And it was a painting that absolutely fascinated Leon Kossoff, the great British artist, who was an artist in residence. He was given the keys to the National Gallery. And he created, from all those drawings that I just flicked through, this interpretation, which is a very large-scale painting, as you're going to see. But again, here you've got Pax, Minerva, Mars. It's quite a different interpretation. And if you know Kossoff's work, very, very different to Chris Ofili, but a real challenge to interpret. This is just a detail from the Kossoff Minerva Protects Pax
And the
painting.
paint is so thick.
And so Naomi and Emma Jo and David, bless them, went down early March 2020 to go and take notes on this painting, which was the wrong time to be visiting London. But you all stayed well afterwards. And because it was obviously COVID was looming. And this is Emma Jo on the right, Naomi on the left, having fun with their, what are these? These are your
shade cards.
Shade cards.
Yeah.
And what are you doing here?
So we're trying to pick colours by matching closely with the painting, and then just making lists, making recipes of what might be in mixtures, so that we could come back and recreate.
And I'll move to this quickly. So this then, I think this, we got back in to the studios beginning of May.
Yeah.
So this is warping up. We had to obviously take lots of protective measures during COVID, as you'll see in a moment, but this is warping up the loom.
So for this, the weaver has to actually walk out the warp. So we walk up and down the studio measuring every inch worth of warp. We still work in feet and inches because all our equipment is still in imperial.
I can't do imperial.
I still think and talk and so we measure out all that warp. It then gets wound round the bottom roller, which you can see, and then fed up through what we call a reed, which is the thing that keeps the warps evenly spaced while we're weaving. And that's what David's doing just now. He's pulling the warp up through each little slit in the reed. And then it would get tied up to the top roller. And then all the warp gets taken to the top of the loom. So it's there for when we wind down, there's more warp still to come.
And can you explain the difference we work on? So this is the cartoon, just to give you a sense of, I think it's quite sort of funny to give that sense of scale. Can you just explain the difference between a high warp loom and a low warp loom?
So technique is very similar, but on a high warp loom, you have the warps vertical. On a low warp loom, it's almost more like a tabletop that the warps are horizontal.
And Dovecot, this is our largest loom. So actually Naomi and I are sitting in just there at the moment, and we've got the studios in front of us. And you look at this, it's fab, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's kind of showing just how many colours would go in. So we've got this bank of wool that we have in front of us, and we're just pulling different ones to mix to wind onto bobbins.
And so you can see this is just when we'd reopened, because people are wearing their masks up there.
And just to put into context, that loom is 7 meters wide, and it was built in the 90s for the R.B. Kitai tapestry that's in the British Library.
Some people really love the backs of the tapestries, don't they?
So those are our bobbins, which are really our only tool. So they hold the wool. It means that we can pass the wool through the warps, and then that pointy bit we beat down with it. So it's a kind of multi-purpose tool. That.
So I'm conscious we might be losing people at this point. We've been talking so long. This is a leg.
It's a leg.
But I just think it's great when you start to see elements emerge as the tapestry works. The weft works its way up the warp. And I would say this is, I think, one of my most favourite interpretations that Dovecot has done, because it's so different to the painting in a way, and I feel it really is so much more appealing, actually. The painting
They bring it to life.
Yeah. So just to give you a few, sometimes we like to work with an artist on multiple projects. If anybody would like to commission a new project with Chris O'Feely, we would love to work with Chris again. But Gary Fabian Miller is an artist a photographer who we've worked with on multiple times, and that has enabled, I think, Naomi and Gary to forge an understanding that goes beyond always needing to speak in words.
Mm-hmm.
This is a tufted artwork, so we don't just create tapestries, we work in tufting, and that is an even softer aesthetic, because you're cutting the yarn on the end, aren't you, rather than seeing it.
You're not seeing the side, you're seeing the cut end.
So this was a series of works that we created with Gary, with him exploring light and colour. And there was a point where they almost look like they're burning, that they've been burnt into the textile. And that's them installed in the Standard Life Aberdeen building in Edinburgh. And this was a huge tapestry that we had the confidence to create on the basis of having worked with Gary, I think, over... and
again, this was just freshly cut from the loom. And I have to say that I've always been amazed walking in to see this tapestry in our gallery and finding it quite unbelievable that a textile could reflect light onto the floor. Just that power of colour, just amazing. I never actually thought that that would be something that you could do.
So this was, again, you can see the Kossoff tapestry on the loom here. This was during lockdown. We've got an Alan Davey work that was to go into an exhibition. And we created 2 new rugs with Gary during the lockdown, which again were really significant commissions for us to be able to just keep everything sustained and to keep everyone. These are a few recent works we've done with Jock McFadden, the Scottish artist who has painted all over, but comes back to Scotland regularly, and this is of Maleg. Kurt Jackson, an artist based in the southwest of England, but who has again worked in Scotland a lot. And this his fabulous rug, a tufted work, Grangemouth at Night. Barbara Ray, an artist who is based in Edinburgh, who Dovecot has created many important commissions with, including the tapestry that hangs in the Festival Theatre in Edinburgh. And here we are back at our building. And then just to give a bit of a plug, we recently had an exhibition, Warhol the Textiles, which got an amazing 2-page review from Valdemir Janacek, no less, saying that an artist is always enhanced when their work is interpreted in tapestry. So if any of you are artists watching, come and talk to us. But this is our next exhibition, Stitched, which opens on the 25th of October. And this will look at embroidery. And as some of you might be aware, there's lots of talk about the Bayeux tapestry coming back as some sort of new entente cordiale with France. But what's important is that the Bayeux tapestry is not a tapestry, it is an embroidery. It uses the traditional opus anglicanum embroidery, was absolutely, the UK was the best at embroidery in the medieval period. And this exhibition looks at Scottish embroidery from 1720 to 1920, and it's all coming from the National Trust for Scotland collections. So we're very excited about that show. So please come up and visit us between late October and the middle of January. And then from February next year, we're going to be showing the Scottish colourists, which we hope will give a new perspective on this incredible group of artists by showing them in the context of their contemporaries, especially the Bloomsbury, who get a lot more attention. So we're ready for questions if there are any. Well, we haven't lost too many people.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, both of you. That was just so fascinating to listen to. And I think not just because the works are so beautiful and intricate, but because as you talk, you really light up. You can tell how much you love the works, but also have pride in your work. So it's just been a real joy to listen to and to learn more about. There are some questions.
I can't see them.
Andrew says he can see why Ophelia set you the challenge to capture water-based paint, but he asks, is there an argument amongst weavers or specialist tapestry critics about the extent to which you faithfully capture these effects, or how much you kind of move it towards a more woven-based style? And is there kind of different views out there about that?
I think what we're doing as tapestry weavers is finding the weaving solution for an artist medium. So we're doing our best to find the solution in a different medium. I mean, watercolor is not solid. Tapestry is very much solid, but you know, that magic of trying to make something feel quite transparent in places. I think, yeah, it's a challenge, but then I don't think we're trying to find our way of capturing that same effect, I suppose. Don't know if that's answered it.
And it's such a great thing that Valdemar said that every work benefits from this as well.
I think it's also for, like, you can have communication that's just more intuitive, but you have that opportunity to reflect back on an artist, how their work feels and how you're interpreting it in quite a formal way, because it's about the aesthetic. It doesn't have to be about the idea that the artist is communicating.
I think it's, and I think often, you know, again, it's quite instinctive that we know actually we need to use cotton in this bit because it's going to give a cleaner effect, or it's going to give a a bit of a shine and reflection. So there's, I suppose, just with experience and the instinct of using our material, we kind of know what works. Though we will often try different things and compare them to see which one really gives us quite a journey before we ever actually get to the loom of experimenting and just playing a bit to kind of find the right solution, because there's so many different ways you could approach something.
How long did it take to make the Chrysophylle tapestry?
It took us nearly 3 years.
And was that purely working on that, or did you have other things going on at the same time?
We had another commission, but there were always at least 3 weavers working on the Ophelia, sometimes more. But we had other commissions happening at the same time.
So we could talk about next year. One of the artists that we've worked with on multiple commissions is the artist Victoria Crowe, we've just got a tufted work on show in London in Cork Street at Flowers Gallery at the moment. And Victoria Crowe, you've worked with on multiple commissions, but one was the Leather Sellers tapestry. So it's interesting that Dovecot had 2 major commissions, one the cloth workers and the other the leather sellers, that happened at the same time. So we could come back and talk about that next year, because Victoria Crowe turns 80. I'm not sure I'm supposed to say that, but anyway, it's a big birthday year. So that is a really extraordinary commission, and that sits much more in the context of the building. So the Leather Sellers was commissioned with the architect Eric Parry being very involved. He's a Royal Academician architect, and he could see that ability for tapestry to sort of sit as one element of his vision for how that hall should sit. So I think that's quite a different way of looking at it, isn't it? That's where an artist is seeing their work in a, I guess, Gesamtkunstwerk, that idea of the whole environment, which is what Morris really wanted for tapestry.
So Ariel asks, how do you choose the artists that you're going to collaborate with, and what led you to decide to collaborate with Chrysophylle? She says, do you consider the artist's styles, techniques and mediums in the selection process? I suppose, do you think it will translate?
So sometimes we don't choose the artist. Sometimes a commissioner will come with an artist. With this commission, we suggested some artists to the commissioners and they chose Chris. There's sometimes artists that I would not pick, probably because of the complexity, or that their work sometimes is too big and it wouldn't give us the scope to blow it up. It would have to be an enormous tapestry. But I quite like the challenge of just different artists. I mean, every tapestry is different. Every artist has a different handwriting. So you're constantly being challenged. You're constantly having to find solutions for things. So
different media as well, because I think in Edinburgh, well, in Scotland, you've got quite a strong tradition of printmaking. And I find that really interesting, that the print, you're layering it on the surface. Whereas with tapestry, you're building it up. So it's quite a different effect, that you're creating a very different way. But also Gary's work in photography, and then more recently Christine Borland, who presented a digital.
Yeah.
So Naomi and the team were presented with a moving animation.
And then we chose some stills from that animation, but they were very much digital with a black background. And we ended up creating shaped tapestry, shaped forms that were actually quite sculptural and had both transparent bits in it and voids. So there were bits cut away so that you could see through them. So no 2 tapestries are ever the same.
Thank you. Can I ask, I don't know, am I allowed to ask what you have on the looms now? What are you
Yeah.
working on?
So just now we're weaving a GMW Turner tapestry. It's his 250th anniversary of his birth next year, so that's nice to be sort of acknowledging, celebrating that. My last apprentice, Elaine, actually is her final apprentice piece. So at the end of the apprentice, they weave a tapestry that sort of tests and shows the skills that they've achieved over their apprenticeship. And for that, she was given a very small Turner watercolour from the Vaughan collection in the National Galleries of Scotland and interpreted that. And then we are now weaving that on a much larger scale. So that's happening just now.
And we prefer, where possible, to work on commissions. So we've just completed a commission with Kay Donachie that will be in a major sort of London private venue. And then we also have a forthcoming commission with University of Oxford. So that's really exciting. And we also have a project for a London gallery, which will be revealed in spring next year. But I think the one that we've just installed this summer is the Edinburgh 7. So that was a tapestry which was a Dovecot commission. So that's where we generated the funding with an amazing donor to celebrate the first women to go to university in the UK. And they came to Edinburgh. They were known as the Edinburgh 7, and that tapestry has just been installed in the Edinburgh Futures Institute. So anyone can go and see that in the University of Edinburgh. It's a brand new building, but it was on show in the medieval galleries in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London until fairly recently. We've got a new project we're doing for V&A Dundee next year. So sometimes we work speculatively, and the challenge with that is because we don't have any public funding, we have to find ways to support creating those projects. So if anybody heard any noise, it's because we've got some major business that's going to be having an event in our building tomorrow. Earlier this year, we had to close for a few weeks, but you got to go on residency, didn't you?
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to make things work. And tapestry it's the most complex art form that I've had the privilege of trying to make it work in the context of both, I guess, the art world and the art market, and trying to increase audiences for it. So thank you to the art history professionals and society, because I think there's a real energy around textile and tapestry, and I think that's really exciting at the moment in terms of what's happening in museums and galleries, where it hasn't always, perhaps for us, it's the finest of the fine arts and it's at the pinnacle, but in some institutions it hasn't always been collected or necessarily given as much attention. So yeah, I think the artists are sometimes coming to us.
Yeah.
It always sounds wonderful and very intriguing, and I can't wait to hear more, particularly about the Turner, I think. So I think we should call it a night there. Then just to remind people that the exhibition is on it until the 5th of October in Edinburgh. So I hope people get a chance to come and visit you.
Yeah, and if anyone's got any questions, they can always email us at info@Dovecot. My colleagues will love me for putting that up, but it's on our website, info@dovecotstudios.com. And if you direct it to Naomi and Celia, then that will get to us.
And it's definitely worth seeing in person.
Yeah.
It's hard to capture in photos.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much, both of you, and thank you everyone for coming. And have a lovely rest of the evenings, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.